Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Seth-Talk-Show. I'm your host, Seth. In the very last episode of our show, we're going to be closing out our discussion of globalization by taking an in-depth look at the complex force of globalization. So, now that we have that out of the way, you know what time it is. Cue the intro. Welcome back, everyone. To start off this show, let's introduce our guest. Everyone, give a warm round of applause to Seth Cook. Welcome to the show, Seth. It's always a pleasure to be here, Seth. Thanks for letting me on. On today's show, I have 5 very complex questions that I'm going to ask you, Seth, and your job is to answer them to the best of your ability. Sound good? Sure thing, Seth. You just ask the questions and I'll give you the best responses that I can. Perfect. Let's just get straight into this. Question 1. How does globalization impact identity? That's actually such a good question to start us off. Let's start with just zooming in and talking about this one word, identity. Now, the word identity means the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. So tying this into globalization is actually quite easy. If you think about it, a person's identity can be defined so much by, number 1, the ideas and people surrounding and influencing them at all times, and number 2, the person's individual ideas of their own. So basically what this means is that a person's identity can be defined by like a million different things, but some of the main factors are like the people that they surround themselves with, the ideas that they see online and interact with other people, and then of course their own thoughts and ideas. Now, the ideas that are spread by globalization can have a huge impact on identity by bringing ideas from all around the world and just surrounding these individual people with these ideas. For example, let's take the internet. In this case study, we can clearly see the impact that the internet alone has on people's identity. People can now associate themselves with other people from all across the globe with literally any idea they choose. You wanna be in a club with someone about dogs or play Minecraft together or anything. You can literally connect with people with all sorts of different ideas like anywhere, and this has a giant impact on identity. They can participate in different activities that contribute to a person's identity and so much more. So that's why I think that globalization actually has a giant impact on people's identity, and like people don't talk about it that much, but it's crazy. That's actually a really good way of putting things, Seth. Globalization really does have a massive impact on the way that people live their lives and view the world. On to our next question. What are the most valuable lessons that we can learn from historical globalization? This is also a really good question, Seth. I think that I'm going to pick 2 of the most important lessons to share today. Keep in mind that this period of time had many different lessons that have been crucial to our lives here in economic globalization. So the 2 that I'm going to be sharing today are, number 1, war should be avoided at all costs. Now, this is a very important lesson that we have learned from our past. During historical globalization, 2 different world wars occurred, and infinite other wars also happened in our world. These wars had countless tragic deaths, families losing loved ones, towns and cities and even countries getting destroyed, and many other things among the global chaos. This really showed us just how important it is to try our best to settle issues without having to take it to war. It's not really worth it to provide all the suffering and conflict just over like a stupid war. That being said, war is still a persistent occurrence in our day and age now, but I think that even our society to this day has learned that they've learned a great few things from the past world wars. War should be avoided at all costs. Lesson 2. This one's big. Equal rights. One of the most common situations you'll come across in historical globalization is individuals or groups of people being treated differently due to things that they can't even change. Let's take a look at the white man's burden and social Darwinism. During this time, people from all across the world believed that the the white man had all the power. The white man had all of the rights, and it was the white man's duty to, quote unquote, fix everyone else. During this period, the slave trade also occurred. Many people of color were forced across the sea to become slaves for, once again, the white man. And this is just talking about the racial side of things. The biggest thing, in my opinion, that we have learned from globalization so far is that we need to strive for equal rights. No discrimination against color, gender, sexuality, etc. And these things are still being worked on. Residential schools didn't end till around 1996, and to this day we still have discrimination in our society, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. But what I do know is that from way back then to now, we have made tons of improvements, and those improvements are only going to keep getting better. And that's only because of the lessons that we've learned from historical globalization. So yeah, I think that it is one of the biggest lessons we can learn, if not the biggest lesson. Okay, on to question number 3. What has been the most significant impacts of economic globalization? This one's a tricky one. It's kind of hard to decide the most significant impacts of this period, partially because we don't even know if it's ended yet, and we most likely never will. To start us off here, I'm going to throw the idea of the internet once again. In my opinion, the internet alone provided one of the greatest leaps, if not the greatest, to globalization. The invention of the internet spiraled so many different impacts all in a very short time, by letting the spread of ideas basically fast travel across the entire world. If you think about it, before this invention, to have ideas spread to a different place, you had to have someone actually carrying those ideas, which obviously takes time. The invention of the internet allowed people to share their own ideas with other people with similar or maybe even the same ideas in a matter of seconds. Literally, you can send a message to someone across the entire world with just a click of a button. And we aren't even just talking about messages either. The internet allows search engines such as Google and Safari to provide access to basically any information you want. If you want to look up a funny cat fact or the world news or like hockey score, it's literally right there. It's literally the entire reason I can do this project right now, for research. And yeah, to go along with this, various technological advancements has also been a very significant impact of economic globalization. Not only just the internet, but the devices that give us access to the internet are getting scarily good. iPhones, computers, state-of-the-art programs, etc. These things are crazy. These advancements have allowed us to leap to never before seen heights and prove just how much we are capable of. This technology also can help us with global issues such as war, if it's necessary, and also just everyday tasks that you might need to accomplish. Now, I'm also not saying every advancement in tech and in general we have made is necessarily a good one. Obviously, with good there are going to be bad, and there are definitely tons of negative impacts of the internet as well, like trolls, weapons, so much more. But nevertheless, they are still impacts. Another point I'd like to make is that in this period of economic globalization, we have been leaning to better accept everyone. Just like I stated in the last question, most countries, we are at a point in time where equal rights are like getting so much better. Equal rights are right around the corner. People like Martin Luther King Jr. have made giant pushes for civil rights, and there's no doubt been a very significant impact. Lastly, I'd like us all to think of economic globalization as follows. A time of new ideas to prevent past tragedies. That's what I'd like to put it. I'll say that again. A time of new ideas to prevent past tragedies. Basically, what I'm saying here is that lots of the time I think what happens here in economic globalization is us trying to find new ways to prevent things from happening again, like they did in historical globalization, while at the same time facing new problems that have never been seen before. For example, we as a society have been working hard to prevent things like the slave trade or residential schools from happening again, but in doing so, we also have to face new criticisms like stuff through the internet and stuff like that. And an example of this was COVID. We were able to stop COVID so much better now than we would have been able to, like, say, 100 years ago. COVID was, don't get me wrong, it was awful. People died, it was terrible. But the thing is, if they had COVID back in the days like the Black Death, we treated COVID so much faster, so much more efficient than people would have been able to in the days of the Black Plague, because they just didn't have that technology and information that we have now because of globalization. So I think that, yeah, that's some of the most significant impacts. Globalization allows us to find new solutions to things like this so much easier. Very insightful. On to question 4. How are the periods of time known as historical and economic globalization similar and different? I think that this question fits pretty well into what we've been talking about, Seth. In terms of similarities, I can see the idea of learning as one of the main things that is similar about these periods. Let's first take a look at historical globalization. In this period, we can clearly see people learning from their mistakes. Take things like the scramble of Africa, or even colonization in general, the slave trade, World War I and II, etc. These are all things that happened that left people learning from their mistakes. People learned how bad the effects of colonization actually are. They learned that the slave trade was awful thing and should have never happened. They learned that war doesn't really have to be the answer. And the same can be said for economic globalization. We still always have things to learn, and at this point, the internet has become a common trend of this video, so why not talk about it? The internet has also came with a giant learning curve, and obviously, we have all learned from mistakes on the internet. On the flip side, if you really want to think about it, these two periods are also wildly different. I mean, like, they literally are split up into two different periods for a reason, right? They are literally two different times. So I'd like to think of it like this. Historical globalization was very much a time of dividing up the world and setting everything up. Like, let's think about it in like Risk, right? At the beginning of a Risk game, you're dividing up all the continents, you're setting up everything just like that. That's the same thing as historical globalization. Colonization was a giant thing. European powers went crazy colonizing places from all around the world. You have events like the Scramble of Africa, where all of Africa was split up and taken by those same European powers. World wars also gave countries the chance to take over areas that they wanted and fight for territories that they would benefit them. Economic globalization is way more focused on the time after the world has been divided up. That includes everything basically that we would do after, such as inventing new technologies, exchanging goods, so much more. So I think overall there's a lot more differences than similarities, but if we look hard enough, we can also see a lot of similarities too. That actually makes a lot of sense. It's really helpful to visualize the two different periods like that. Thank you. Let's now move on to our very last question of the night. Based on your understanding of the current events, what is the future of globalization looking like? Man, what a great question to end the last ever talk show off. A conclusion to globalization. Well, here's the thing, Seth. I don't think globalization will ever really end. Well, that is until the world ends, that is, but who knows when that will happen. So what I was saying is that I don't think that globalization will really ever end. It's always going to be a constant thing. As long as our world is alive, globalization will also be alive. You can't really like put a pause on the spread of ideas, because it's always going to be happening. No matter what you do, people are going to spread information, people are going to share their ideas. It's going to spread across the entire world, right? So I think right now, in the period we are, where the internet makes it so accessible to spread information, and who knows how like much better the internet will even get. So I think that globalization is ramping up. So like, you know, back in the day, people would spread ideas and it would go a lot slower than things do today. And I think with the rise of technologies and the internet, globalization also will have a giant rise. It won't stop, and it will just keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing until eventually our world ends, which I don't know when that's going to happen or how that's going to happen, but probably long after we're gone. Anyways, to answer your question, I think globalization is just going to keep improving. There's no way to stop it at this point, especially like I said, with the internet, it just is not going to stop, and it's going to keep going and going and going. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it can be both. Depending on the people and the ideas that are being spread, globalization can be a very useful thing, such as like like we looked at before in case of COVID and the Black Plague, where information could be spread about how to treat these things and how to best prepare for it and everything like that. Those are positive impacts to globalization, and those are definitely here today. But I also think that there is some negative impacts, like for example, spread of rumors, and like you can go on Twitter and scroll through for a bit and you can see tons of different rumors that are all spreading, and I think those are more of like the bad things that are happening from globalization. So I think, yeah, to summarize it, globalization is not going anywhere. In fact, I think it's actually going up, and it will continue to go up until we stop. And I don't think that mankind or humans will stop anytime soon with their advancements. So yeah, that's so true. I guess we can always rely on globalization to be there for us whenever we need it. But that being said, I think we are actually out of time for today's show. I'd like to give one more giant thank you to our guest here, Seth Cook, for teaching us all about some in-depth of globalization. And yeah, all of you for watching. If you came out here today for the show or just watching it online, I just want to thank you so much for being here and watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I think that's about all for today. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and yeah, that's gonna be it. So see you guys later. Bye.